For 40 years, I cleaned every corner of that house. I knew the noise the kitchen faucet made when it was loose. I knew exactly where the sun hit the living room wall in the morning. I cooked thousands of meals on that wooden table that I chose myself at a clearance sale. I welcomed my children's friends when they were little. I took care of colds, tears, joy, first love, and disappointment. My name wasn't on the house deed, but everyone knew that the heart of that house was mine. I married young, 19 years old. He had the house. I had the dreams of a young girl who thought love was enough. I never thought it was important to put my name on the documents. We were married, weren't we? It was our house, our children, our life. I thought these things didn't need to be written on paper when they were written in the heart. How wrong I was. 40 years taking care of every detail. Painting walls when the paint peeled. Choosing new curtains when the old ones faded. Replacing faucets when they dripped. Fixing what broke with my own hands because money was always tight. Organizing every drawer, every cupboard, every little corner. I knew every crack in the wall, every stain on the ceiling that appeared when it rained heavily in the winter. The boys grew up there, Pedro and João, 2 years apart. I learned to cook what each one liked. Pedro loved my carrot cake. João preferred brigadeiro. I stayed up late waiting when they went out at night as teenagers. I cleaned up vomit when they came home drunk from college. I consoled them when their hearts broke because of a girlfriend. I lent them money when they were tight at the beginning of their adult lives. I never charged for anything. I never asked for recognition. I never said I was tired. I thought that's what a woman did. Cared, loved, was always there, always available, always ready, always willing. When my husband died 3 years ago from a sudden heart attack, I thought the house would naturally stay with me. The boys were already graduated, married, with their own lives. I would grow old there, surrounded by my memories, my possessions, my plants. It was fair, wasn't it? 40 years of dedication deserved at least that. But the will said otherwise. The house was left to the boys. Both of them, 50-50, equal inheritance. And what about me? I had the right to stay living there as long as I was alive. That's what was written on the paper, plain and clear. The right to live there until the end of my life. The right to stay, as if I were a tenant in my own life. As if I were a tolerated boarder out of charity. At first, everything was fine. They would come on Sundays, bring the grandkids. I would make a special lunch, lasagna, which was everyone's favorite dish. The house remained alive, full of children's laughter, full of chatter, full of family. It continued to be a home. But things started to change when the younger one, João, lost his job at the company where he had worked for 10 years. Staff cuts. And when the older one, Pedro, divorced his wife after 15 years of marriage. Child support, lawyer, division of assets. Money started to get tight for everyone. That's when they had the brilliant idea. They called me into the living room on a Tuesday morning, both of them together, serious. With that look I had known since they were little when they had done something wrong and were coming to tell me before I found out. "We need to talk to you, Mom." I sat in the armchair where I always sat. The floral armchair I chose 15 years ago when we renovated the living room with the money left over from the Christmas bonus. My little corner, my place. "Look, Mom, the house is too big for you. You stay here alone all week. And we're going through financial difficulties." Then I felt my heart sink. When your child starts saying the house is too big, it means there's news coming. We thought of a solution that can help everyone. What I didn't know was that everyone didn't include me. We're going to turn the house into an Airbnb. There are lots of tourists coming to the city because of the winter festival. We can make good money. People are paying 200 Ries per day for a house like this, well located. And me? I asked softly, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. You can stay in the small house out back. We're going to renovate it, make it nice. It will have its own bathroom, a small kitchen, a cozy little room. It will be comfortable. And you'll have more privacy too. Small house out back. 40 years taking care of that house to end up living in the small house out back, which used to be a junk storage. 40 years being the owner of the house to become the tenant of the backyard. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I didn't cry in front of them. I just nodded slowly and said I needed to think it over calmly. They left relieved. Pedro even gave a kiss on my forehead. They thought I had accepted it well, that I had understood their situation, that I was the always understanding mother. But there's a pain that doesn't make noise. It just spreads through your bones, takes over everything inside, slowly draining you. That night I stayed up until dawn, walking around the house, touching the furniture as if I were saying goodbye, reminiscing about everything that happened in every corner, every memory stuck to the walls. There in the kitchen, I baked Pedro's first birthday cake. It burned on the bottom because the oven was old, but he ate it anyway, saying it was the most delicious cake in the world. There in the living room, I hand-sewed the boys' carnival costumes because we didn't have money to buy new ones. I spent whole nights cutting fabric, gluing sequins, making them feel like the most handsome boys in the parade. There in the hallway, I walked in the early morning with them in my arms when they were babies and wouldn't stop crying. I sang softly so as not to wake their father who worked early. There in the bedroom, I consoled their first heartbreaks. I listened to confessions, fears, dreams. I gave advice that I thought would last a lifetime. Every corner of that house had a piece of my life stuck to it. 40 years of history don't fit in a granny flat, and they wanted me to live in the backyard so strangers could sleep in my bed, use my table, walk on the floor I had polished on my knees so many times. It took me 2 weeks to give them an answer, not because I had a real choice. I knew I didn't. If I said no, they would find another way. Maybe they'd send me to one of their houses. Maybe they'd suggest a nursing home. Maybe they'd make me understand that I was being selfish, that I was hindering the family's future. So I said yes, with a small voice, almost whispering. They were happy. They thanked me. They said I was the best mother in the world, that everything would work out, that I would see how good it was going to be. The renovation of the granny flat took 2 months. Meanwhile, they were already getting everything ready to list the house. They hired a professional photographer to take pictures for the website. They bought new sheets, fluffy towels, nice glasses, colorful dishes. They replaced the old TV with a huge smart TV. They treated my house like it was a product, a business, an opportunity to make money. I watched everything in silence, pretending it didn't hurt. On the day I moved to the granny flat, I carried only the essentials, my clothes in the small wardrobe, some family photos in a shoebox, the Bible I got as a wedding gift, the old radio I listened to in the morning while making coffee, the rocking chair that belonged to my mother. The rest stayed to decorate the house for tourists, to add charm, to make the environment cozy for those who would pay 200 reais a night. My dishes turned into rental utensils. My favorite armchair became Airbnb furniture. My dining table became a guest attraction. My plants became decoration. My life became a backdrop. The first reservation arrived on a Friday. A young, beautiful, well-dressed couple. She was about the same age I was when I first moved into that house. They arrived driving an imported car, carrying branded suitcases. I was in the tiny kitchenette of the back house making coffee when I heard them arriving, laughing loudly, talking about the trip, excited about the romantic weekend. They opened the door of my house as if it were theirs, because for 3 days, it was. I sat in the kitchen chair and cried. I cried softly so they wouldn't hear from the yard, because loud crying bothers the guests, and a bothered guest leaves a bad review on the site. During the night I heard noise, the TV on at high volume, animated conversation, laughter, music, life happening in my house while I was there beside it, in the dark, like a retired maid. On Saturday morning, they went out to stroll around the historic center. I took the opportunity to enter the house and grab a pot I had forgotten and was missing in the small kitchen. When I opened the door to my own house, I almost collapsed on the floor. Everything was different, completely different. The kids had taken down almost all my family photos. Instead of the wedding portraits, graduation pictures, and the grandkids' birthday photos, they had placed some modern plants in colorful pots. They replaced the floral cushions on the sofa with plain neutral ones. They put the new TV in a position I never liked. They removed the rug that I had hand-stitched. It didn't look like my house anymore. It looked like a hotel without personality. Clean, organized, beautiful, but soulless. I went to the room where I had slept for 40 years. The bed was unmade, with sheets I didn't recognize, wet towels thrown on the bathroom floor, my pillow with the scent of an expensive perfume I had never used. A stranger had slept in my place, had used my bathroom, had walked on my floor. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked out the window. From there, I could see the small house where I now lived, tiny, leaning against the back wall, forgotten at the end of the yard like an afterthought. It was at that moment that I clearly realized what had happened to me. I hadn't left my house by choice. I hadn't chosen to live in a smaller house for practicality. I had been expelled from my own life. 40 years dedicated to that family. 40 years caring, loving, sacrificing, giving up my dreams so theirs could become reality. And in the end, when they needed money, I became what was left over, what could be discarded without much remorse. The mother who doesn't make trouble, the mother who accepts everything, the mother who understands the situation. I went back to the small house and stayed for 3 days without leaving. I didn't shower. I didn't comb my hair. I didn't cook. I stayed there in the rocking chair, looking at the wall, trying to understand how I had reached that point. The boys came over on Sunday to see if I was okay. They brought a cake purchased from the supermarket. They said the first weekend of Airbnb had been a success, that the guests had left an excellent review on the site, that they already had a booking for the next month. They were radiant, proud, talking about plans to expand the business. I was dying inside and they were celebrating. It was on a Tuesday morning, exactly a month after I moved to the small house, that everything changed in my life. I was sitting at the back door, drinking reheated coffee, looking at the yard I had always cared for with so much affection, when I heard a voice. It was not a voice I heard with my ears. It was a voice I felt in my chest, deep in my soul. Daughter, I saw everything. I looked around, frightened. There was no one, but the voice continued. I saw every day you took care of this family. Every night you stayed up worrying. Every tear you swallowed so as not to bother anyone. Every piece of yourself you gave until almost nothing was left. It was as if someone were sitting by my side, speaking softly, with the sweetest voice I had ever heard in my life. You haven't lost your home, daughter. You are gaining a home in me. At that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that it was Jesus speaking to me. I can't explain how I knew, but I knew with every fiber of my being. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel alone in the world. Daughter, they can take your house, but they cannot take your dignity. They can put you in the backyard, but they cannot take you out of the center of my heart. I began to cry, but it was no longer tears of sadness, of revolt, of abandonment. It was tears of relief from someone who was finally seen, from someone who was finally heard. You were never a tenant in your own life. You were a servant, and I see all servants. I honor all servants. I got up from the chair and looked at the big house. It still hurt to see strangers living there. It still hurt to see my life turned into a business, but it didn't hurt the same way anymore, because I had understood something important. That house was never truly mine. If it were truly mine, no one could have taken me away from there. If it were truly mine, I would have fought for it. If it were truly mine, I wouldn't have accepted being expelled without making a fuss. The things that are truly ours, no one can take away. The love I gave to my children for 40 years, no one can take that away from me. The care I had for that family, no one can erase that from history. The woman I became during all those years, no one can touch that. They took my house, but they didn't take my dignity. They took my place in the living room, but they didn't take my place in God's heart. They took my name from the door, but they didn't take my worth as a person. And I started to discover that living in the outbuilding was not a punishment. It was not a humiliation. It was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new life. For the first time in 40 years, I didn't need to take care of anyone but myself. I didn't need to have lunch ready every Sunday. I didn't need to clean up anyone else's mess. I didn't need to be available 24 hours a day. I didn't need to please everyone all the time. I could just be me. For the first time in my life, I could discover who I was when I wasn't serving everyone. I started to arrange the outbuilding my way, slowly, with care. I put my favorite photos on the wall. I organized my few books on a small shelf that Pedro made when he was a teenager. I made a little corner for prayer with the Bible, a rosary, and a candle. I bought a small TV with the money I had saved. I chose the colors I liked for the curtain, the rug, the bed set. I planted flowers in the window box. It became my space. Small, but truly mine. It wasn't big. It wasn't luxurious, but it was truly mine. No one was going to decide that I had to leave there. No one was going to turn that little corner into a business. The kids kept coming to visit, of course, but now there was a different distance. They came as visitors, not as children who lived in their mother's house. They knocked on the outbuilding door. They asked permission to enter. They asked if I was busy. And you know what I discovered? I liked this new distance. I wish I didn't always have to be available. I wish I could say I was tired when they wanted me to take care of the grandchildren on the weekend. I wish I could go out without having to tell anyone. I wish I could eat what I wanted, when I wanted, without having to please everyone's tastes. I wish I could watch my TV shows without anyone complaining that they were nonsense. I wish I could read my books in peace. I wish I could pray my rosary without rushing. I wish I had privacy. I wish I had silence. I wish I had space to think. 3 months after the first booking, one of the guests came to talk to me. She was a woman about my age, traveling alone for the first time in her life after being widowed. She saw me watering the flowers in the planter and started a conversation over the low fence. "Are you the owner of the house?" I smiled. It was the first time I truly smiled in months. "No, I live in the back house. The house belongs to my children now." She looked at me in a strange way, as if she had understood something I hadn't said. "But the house was yours before, wasn't it?" "Yes, For 40 years. Now it's an Airbnb. I don't know why, but I told her the whole story. Perhaps because it had been a long time since anyone really asked about me. Perhaps because she had the same look of someone who had experienced great losses. She listened to me in silence, nodding her head, making little sounds as if she understood, as if she knew. In the end, she told me something I will never forget, as long as I live. You know they did this because they knew you would accept it, don't you? What do you mean? They knew you wouldn't fight, that you wouldn't make a scene, that you wouldn't hire a lawyer, that you would swallow it quietly and comply as you always did. It hit me like a punch in the stomach, because it was true. It was a truth I didn't want to see, but it was true. They knew exactly how I was going to react, because they had known me for 40 years. They knew I would accept, because I always accepted everything. I have always been the woman who doesn't make trouble, who doesn't complain, who adapts, who complies, who puts others' needs ahead of her own. And they used that against me. They used my kindness against me. They used my love against me. They used my dedication against me. They used my conciliatory nature against me. If I were the type of woman who fights for her rights, who makes a scene, who doesn't accept just anything, who hires a lawyer, who fights in court, they would never have proposed that I live in the shed. They proposed it precisely because they knew I would accept without making a fuss. And I accepted, just as they predicted. That night, after the woman left, I stayed up late thinking about what she had said, and I realized she was completely right. But I also realized something she didn't know. I didn't accept because I was naive. I didn't accept because I was weak. I didn't accept because I didn't know how to defend myself. I accepted because I loved them more than I loved myself. And I thought that love would be recognized. I thought that sacrifice would be valued. I thought they would see the depth of my commitment and treat me with the care I deserved. But that didn't happen. My love was interpreted as weakness. My dedication was interpreted as obligation. My sacrifice was interpreted as normalcy. And that wasn't love from them. It was use. It was exploitation. It was convenience. It was that night that I understood that God had not brought me to the shed to humiliate me. He had not allowed me to go through that to punish me. He had brought me here to teach me, to show me that I was worth more than I thought I was worth, that I deserved more than I thought I deserved, that I could say no, that I could have my own opinion, that I could take up space in the world, even if it was a small space, in a little house at the back of the yard. God was teaching me to love myself, something I had never learned in 62 years of life. Today, 2 years later, I still live in the little house, not because I have no choice, not because I have nowhere to go, not because I am resigned to my fate. I live here because I choose to, because I like it, because here I am the owner of my own life. I found out I prefer living alone than living while being invisible. I prefer having little space while being respected than having a lot of space while being ignored. I prefer being the owner of a small house than being a tenant of a mansion. The boys still rent out the house. They still make money from it. The business is doing well. They already bought new furniture, renovated the bathroom, installed air conditioning in the rooms. And I don't care anymore. I don't feel anger anymore. I don't feel resentment anymore. I don't keep imagining what could have been different, because I discovered something very important. They may have kept the house, but I kept the lesson. They may have kept the money, but I kept the freedom. They may have kept the space, but I kept the peace. I learned that I don't need to erase myself to be loved. I learned that I don't need to accept just anything to have a place in the world. I learned that I can say no without feeling guilty. I learned that I can have my own opinion without asking for permission. I learned that I can take up space without apologizing, even if it is a small space, even if it is a little house at the back of the yard. And I learned that God never forgot me, never abandoned me, never punished me. He freed me from the obligation of always being available. He freed me from the need to please everyone. He freed me from the prison of being the woman who never causes trouble. He freed me from the chains of being the perfect mother who sacrifices herself for her children until death. Today, I cause trouble when I need to. I say no when I don't want to. I speak my mind without fear. I occupy my space without apologizing. I take care of myself without feeling selfish. And you know what else? I deeply like who I've become. I like the woman who lives in the small house. She is stronger than the woman who lived in the big house. More free, more true, more herself, more loved by God. Perhaps you too have been placed in the backyard of someone's life. Perhaps you too have accepted less than you deserved because you loved more than you loved yourself. Perhaps you too have been the woman who never causes trouble, who always complies, who always conforms. But listen to this from the bottom of my heart. God has not forgotten you. He has not abandoned you. He has not punished you. He has freed you. And the place where you are now, no matter how small, no matter how painful it may seem, could be the place where you will learn to be who you really are. It could be the place where you will discover your own voice. It could be the place where you will learn to say no. It could be the place where you will begin to truly love yourself. Because sometimes we need to lose the house to find the home. And sometimes the home is not a place. It's a person. It's yourself. If this video moved you, the next one will move you even more. Click here and continue with me.